Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you today as we're going to be speaking about the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, the Second Amendment, the Ninth Circuit Court, and how all of these are playing together to affect your life. And it's something that's very important because in the United States, there may be nothing more vital to this nation and its foundation and its future than the Second Amendment, perhaps only the First Amendment itself. So we want to take our First Amendment right, and we want to discuss the impact of the Kyle Rittenhouse trial on the Second Amendment based on what we have seen throughout this entire year of 2021. And I think it's an appropriate time since we do see today, November 12th, the Kyle Rittenhouse trial is basically taking a break from the jury, working out what the charges are or will be going forward. Now, before we start this discussion, I do want to mention that if this is the first time that you are seeing our channel, we want to welcome you and we thank you for joining us. We want you to know that we do long-form political commentary. And every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream. We reach out on YouTube and Facebook, Twitter, and DLive, all the social media that the internet overlords will allow, to be able to speak with you, to get your tweets, your chats, and your phone calls from anywhere in the world to tell us what you think about the issues that are affecting us all. And we do this because we believe in the First Amendment. We believe in your right to free speech, an inalienable right, we believe, anywhere in the world. Now, your government may not agree, the internet overlords may not agree, but we believe it is your inalienable right to be able to speak, and we look forward every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to join you in that expression of free speech, to hear what you have to say. So we hope that we will see you this Sunday at 2:30 p.m. But let's address the issue that's going on right now. As many people may be aware, there is currently a trial going on for Kyle Rittenhouse. This is in reference to the Kenosha shooting. To give some background, there was in 2020, there was Jacob Blake, a gentleman who had violated the law. He had attacked a woman, mother of some of his children. Police were called. He fought with those police while armed with a knife. He then attempted to elude the police, and in eluding the police, he was shot. These are facts. They are confirmed both by Jacob Blake, who was shot, as well as police officers and video of the event. Further, because of that, and in the environment in 2020, we know for a fact that there were riots going on across America because of George Floyd and his shooting. And racial tensions were at an extreme high in this nation. In Kenosha, because of the shooting of Jacob Blake, we saw that riots occurred for several days. And that Kyle Rittenhouse came into that environment, and the question of whether he should or should not is not in question in the court of law, because that's not important. What is important is that Kyle Rittenhouse had a firearm, which is questionably allowed by law, and he went to defend a property, which is allowed by law. And throughout the process of that night, there were 3 individuals who attacked Kyle Rittenhouse. Kyle Rittenhouse shot those individuals. And the question is this an act of self-defense? More importantly, there is the question that is inherent in this at its core. And that question is, do you have a right to have a firearm? I think that's the biggest thing that's being discussed. I think that's the core issue behind everything with Kyle Rittenhouse. And we've heard this from many individuals on the internet. I will give you, in the news media. So, and I do recommend, by the way, if you want to see what's been going on in the case, and we have been watching the trial almost nonstop since it first started. And we've been watching Riquetta Law, who has been on with several attorneys discussing the case and the law in the United States. But if you want to see what the news media had to say, here's a clip, and I want you to hear what CNN is saying about this trial.
This theme of white wannabe vigilantism that I think encapsulates both of these trials. And I wonder what you think about, look, laws aside, how is the defense doing aside? What do you think about just this idea that this is something people do, that in some places this is still okay?
Well, it's the same idea as I was saying about the judge. This is okay because people are used to it. This is the ultimate entitlement. That, again, you can insert yourself into a situation with a gun that you're not supposed to be carrying, kill two people, injure, and you are made to be a hero by the public. You see someone jogging down the street, and you take it into your hands. You think it's your responsibility to stop that person when you're not even sure if they are committing a crime, because what? It is your street. It is your town. It is your country. It is the ultimate degree of entitlement, where people believe that this is how they're supposed to be. What the right is saying about Kyle Rittenhouse is that, well, the government didn't do its job, so it took a 17-year-old kid to come in and do what was right. That's vigilantism. That's not what people are not supposed to be vigilantes. We're not supposed to be taking justice into our own hands. Imagine if every single person in America did that. Imagine if you call for black men or just black folks to be armed and go out on the streets and, do what they think. Justice, take it back. Remember, and what they did to you and slavery, whatever. Go and take things and do. Imagine if people were condoning that or just doing that. Will there be a different perception in this country about who should and who shouldn't carry guns? Would our gun laws be different? I certainly think so. So there is a double standard, but it is the ultimate degree of entitlement. This is what I'm supposed to do because this belongs to me, meaning this street, this town, and this country. And I think it's tough for people to hear that, but it is the absolute truth. I don't walk down the street saying, I pay taxes here and therefore no. If I see someone breaking the law, I call the cops. That's what they're there for. It's supposed to be about law and order. This isn't about law and order. This is about unlawful conduct and disorder.
Brown had an amazing...
So let me address what Don Lemon is saying, what CNN has been saying in this case, because they misrepresent a great deal. And I want to be very clear. So they started this talking about race. Race is not a factor in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. In fact, race is not a question when it comes to self-defense, nor on the Second Amendment. But they've made this about race. They have interjected in a highly incendiary issue that America has been facing for many decades, and most recently, just in the last year, much of this nation suffered because of racial tensions. And this is what they're interjecting here. That somehow this is about racism. It's about the people's color. Let me mention something very clearly here. Yes, Kyle Rittenhouse is white. So is Joseph Rosenbaum. So is Gage Groswitz. So is also Anthony Huber. Everyone who was shot that night, everyone who was attacked or was being attacked or defending themselves that night were white. Race is not a factor here. The race of the individuals involved is not a factor. Everyone was white. So why are we talking about racism? Why are we talking about people's different racial backgrounds? There is no different racial background in this. So why are you introducing that into a conversation about Kyle Rittenhouse? Why are you introducing that into a discussion about self-defense? Because that's not important. In fact, if it were a woman involved, you might have an argument about gender, but truly, self-defense is not limited to this person's skin color, their ethnicity, their religion, their political beliefs. That has nothing to do with the Second Amendment. That has nothing to do with self-defense. But the news media, in particular with CNN, they have a political agenda. They have an objective that they are trying to achieve. And they are trying to change laws, both by perception and by action. And that's a problem. So we need to address that because it's wrong. Because it changes their perception. I know many people may have watched this, especially if they are more progressive, and they're looking at this going, it's so bad, it's so racist. Race isn't a factor. It has nothing to do with owning a firearm. It has nothing to do with being able to defend yourself. At the very least, you can say that that's been true since the 1960s. You can make that argument beyond that, but we're in 2021, not 1960, not 1950, not 1870. So that isn't the reality we have today, nor is that the reality of the courts and our laws. But yet that's what CNN wants to put in here. And now they want to equate this to, they want to make this about Batman. That's it. They're saying, well, these individuals who are defending themselves, defending their property, defending their homes, well, they're vigilantes. They're Batman. Then no one should be assuming that. Just because I have a right to defend myself, and I do so, whether there is a riot going on or whether I'm sitting in my back porch and it's a sunny day in the middle of summer, it doesn't matter. It's still the same right. That doesn't change. And that doesn't turn me into Batman because I want to defend myself and defend my property, which are my legal rights to do so. And you have the right as a citizen, both with citizen arrest and also in observing a crime, you can defend others, especially when the life of others are in danger. One of the things that might come under that heading is if you see someone who is attempting to burn down a building, which is arson, and you believe or have reason to believe that a person is in there, you have a right to try and defend that person who would be subject to that arson that they may not know about. If someone is trying to burn down a gas station, which would cause potentially an explosion, and there are people around that gas station, and that gas station is in an essentially, not civilian, but residential area, you do have a right to be able to defend those people because they're not aware of the crime that is imminent and the fact that their lives may be imminently in danger. So to hear them say, well, that's being a vigilante and you don't have a right to do it. Yes, you do have a right to do that. That's not what the law in the United States, in any state in this country, allows. That may be true in England or in Canada or in France, Germany, definitely in Australia, where you don't have rights and you don't have freedoms, but in the United States you do. So they're mischaracterizing this, and they're making this statement seem so malicious. But if we want to really walk down that road of racism, as Don Lemon would want us to do, to distract us from the rights of individuals in reference to their Second Amendment rights and self-defense, then I want to go to Malcolm X. And this is Malcolm X speaking in reference to the Second Amendment. I want you to hear what he had to say here.
I don't think when a man is being criminally treated, that some criminal has the right to tell that man what tactics to use to get the criminal off his back. When a criminal starts misusing me, I am going to use whatever is necessary to get that criminal off my back.
Did you hear his words? Why are we going to allow the criminal to decide how we can act? Because that's what's being discussed in the Kyle Rittenhouse case at this time. And we've heard many of the lawyers, attorneys, 6 of them on this, as you can see right now, and they've been discussing this, and sometimes as many as 10. We're hearing the prosecution in the Rittenhouse case say, well, you don't have a right to defend yourself with a firearm even though someone has an intent to use violence against you. That in the middle of a riot, you don't have a right to defend yourself. And they even want to go so far as to say that being in an area with hundreds and thousands of other individuals, to actually be in that area is a provocation and allows those individuals to attack you. That is a core element of the prosecution's case, that the existence of Kyle Rittenhouse is a provocation, and that allowed Mr. Rosenbaum, Mr. Grosswitz to attack him. And that's insane because, again, that's not allowed by law. That's not a true fact. It's good politically. It makes sense if you have a progressive ideology. It's a great way to strip away people's rights, but it doesn't actually, in fact, help you. And that's the problem. We're seeing over and over again that individuals are saying, well, you don't have a right to do X and Y and Z. And we've been seeing this a lot since 2020, since 2019. We've heard Beto O'Rourke say, you don't have a right to own a semi-automatic rifle like an AK-47, like an AR-15, like a Ruger Mini 14, like almost every single firearm in America and in the world for the last half century, maybe more, 75 years. And that should trouble people. That should make people wonder. That should make you question this. That they're saying you don't have a right to be able to defend yourself, that you should have nothing more than a musket, because the law was written in the time when there were muskets, but at the same time, in the beginning of the United States, in the 1700s, there were machine guns, there were cannons, there were multi-barrel guns that individuals were able to use, which had the same effect as the semi-automatic rifles we have today. So their argument falls flat. But if we look at what's been going on, there is an environment that has been going on in this country for some time now. And we can go back, and as you can see on here, this was back on January 29th, 9 days after the Biden-Harris administration had taken over, where we hear that Representative Jackson Lee put forth Bill H.R. 127. And this was a continued attempt, like with Beto O'Rourke, like with the comments from Kamala Harris when she was running for the nomination on the Democratic Party line, which she failed in, when she said that she would enact executive orders to try and strip away people's rights to be able to defend themselves. And Representative Sheila Jackson Lee put forward H.R. 127, a bill that in its essence, in its wording, directly takes away the right of women like this rape survivor from Temple University from being able to defend themselves, to make it financially impossible for those who are poor or in middle income, low income individuals from being able to protect themselves from aggressors. Because we hear Democrats and progressives say, you don't have that right, even though the Second Amendment makes it very clear, yes, you do. And it isn't ending there, because then we heard from the Ninth Circuit Court, which is known as a very liberal, very progressive court on the West Coast of the United States. And in that case, on March 25th, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decided that you do not have the right to step outside of your home and defend yourself. That's a fact. I want to be very clear. Again, in March 2021, the Ninth Circuit Court decided that you, as an American citizen, do not have a right to defend yourself outside of your home. That the only one who could do that are the police. And this is happening at the same time that we are seeing 22 cities across this country, all of them controlled by Democratic majorities, that have said we need to defund the police at the same time. which led to a massive, in some cases exponential increase in crime in terms of violence, of gun deaths and gun violence by criminals. They have empowered the criminals by taking away the police, a deterrent and a force of response to protect the public. And at the same time, we are seeing individuals like Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, like Joe Biden, like Kamala Harris, that have turned around and said, and you don't have a right to defend yourself. That is not a positive for America. That the Ninth Circuit Court says, you don't have a right to defend your property. You don't have the right to defend yourself, your family, your friends and neighbors, even when they are under threat, when they are being attacked, where deadly force may be possible. And that must make people have a pause. It must make you think, what is happening here? I'll give you an example. The Washington Post has already stated on June 28th, the Washington Post gave Joe Biden 4 Pinocchios in their fact check of him for saying that the Second Amendment bans cannons and ownership. The wider and more important thing to understand here is that Joe Biden lied to the American people about what the Second Amendment allows and what it has always allowed. To quote Joe Biden, he stated, and I might add, the Second Amendment from the day it was passed limited the type of people who could own a gun and what type of weapon you could own. You couldn't buy a cannon. This is demonstrably false. And that's not me saying this. That is the Washington Post. That is The Hill. That is the major news media. That are lawyers and constitutional scholars that have looked at this and are telling you that's a lie. It's not real. That's not true. There was no limitation on who could own a firearm. There was no limitation on who could own a cannon. There was no limit on the types of firearms you could own. That's a modern interpretation and restriction on the Second Amendment. You may or may not agree with that, but that isn't what it started as, nor what it was intended to do. That is a fact. David Kopel, a research director and Second Amendment project director at the Independence Institution, said, everything in that statement is wrong. There were no federal laws about the type of gun you could own, and no states limited the type of gun that you could own. That is a fact. Glenn Kessler, who wrote the fact check for the Washington Post, went on to say, some readers might think this is relatively inconsequential, but we disagree. Every U.S. president has a responsibility to get American history correct, especially when he's using a supposed history lesson in service of a political objective. The president's push for more gun restrictions is an important part of this political platform, so he undercuts his cause when he uses false facts. It's very clear, folks. The Biden administration has been under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, along with many progressive Democrats like Representative Sheila Jackson Lee and Beto O'Rourke, that they have had a plan to strip you of your right to defend yourself. They have recontextualized, they have reimagined, they have redefined the meaning and history of what happened in the United States. And they have redefined the Second Amendment. They have put in limitations on it that do not exist. The Second Amendment was never created for hunting. It was never created for recreational sports. It was meant only for self-defense, both from others and from the government itself. That is a fact. That is its definition. That is exactly what it states, and that was the mindset at the time that it was written. But yet we are seeing over and over again that somehow today we've come to the point where the Ninth Circuit Court is saying, no, you don't have that right. that somewhere between the creation of this country and the actual writing of the Second Amendment, you somehow lost the rights that were, first of all, inherent by birth, and then enumerated in the Constitution, in the amendments, which is not a limitation on your rights, but just an enumeration of those rights. So we have to say to ourselves, why are they doing this? Because this has a big impact. You have to understand that since the actual shooting in Kenosha, while the trial was being prepared for Kyle Rittenhouse, we have seen the far left make extreme moves to try and remove the rights of individuals to have the Second Amendment. One of the things, San Jose put pressure in a first of its kind law in the nation, decided that taxpayers must pay for gun violence regardless of the fact that they had nothing to do with that violence, that they are not complicit in the violence that takes place, that criminal actions of others are somehow the responsibility of law-abiding citizens, and that law-abiding citizens must be punished and penalized for actions they themselves did not take. And that is meant to be as a deterrent, because if you own a firearm, you are now guilty of how someone else, somewhere else, used their firearm, and that now you have to be punished for that. That is chilling the Second Amendment. That is punishing. That is undue process. It violates the Eighth Amendment. It is a violation of your rights, your inherent right to, one, defend yourself, and two, to not be punished for something that is not a crime and that you did not commit. And yet we see this. And this is the environment that we are hearing from the news media. This is the environment we're hearing from progressives that are telling us, no, that's perfectly fine. You can be punished for something that you didn't do. Look at the red flag laws in 18 states around this nation and in Washington, D.C. You are punished because someone thinks you might be a harm to yourself and others. And the court proactively comes in using the police to take your property without a crime ever occurring, damaging your social reputation with your community, irreparably damaging your ability to live your life, changing your work and how it's going to be affected, maybe taking away your children if you have them from your home, which is a direct consequence of red flag laws. But again, at its core, there is no due diligence. There is no crime. You are being punished for being a gun owner. That's the environment we are in at this time. And the same thing in San Jose. You're being punished because of the use of a firearm of someone else because you happen to exercise your Second Amendment right. That's like saying, and I want to make it clear, it's the same thing as if because someone on CNN said something that is considered objectionable by someone, you have to pay a tax because you are watching CNN. You would say that's insane. You would say that's not right. Imagine that, I'll give you another example. Let's say that you were watching Dave Chappelle on Netflix. And because someone found some of the things that Dave Chappelle said objectionable, you now have to pay a surcharge to Netflix, or more importantly, a tax to the government, because someone else objected to Dave Chappelle and you watched it. No one would ever agree with that. No one would say that's okay. And yet that is what we are saying about the Second Amendment. That is the environment that we are looking at the Second Amendment under. You don't have a right to defend yourself. You do not have a right to have that property because a small group of individuals do not want you to have it. And if you use that property to defend yourself, then you are still guilty because you had that property with you. Because this is the root of the Kyle Rittenhouse case. Kyle had a firearm, and because he had that firearm, everyone he used that firearm against in self-defense is now a crime, and he is to be punished. And if this goes forward, what this means is everyone who owns a firearm now has to fear not only a criminal, someone who would aggress against them and put them in fear of their life, but they also have to be afraid that if they do use that firearm, if they do protect their life, if they do survive an attack that is placed against them, that they're still going to go to jail. That they're going to be punished right alongside that criminal if that criminal were to survive. Because they owned a firearm, because they defended themselves outside of their home. And I think there's a lot of women, such as the rape survivor in Temple University, who would disagree with that. That just because she wasn't in her home, just because she defended herself from an aggressor who decided they wanted to rape her, if she used a firearm, she shouldn't go to jail for that. And that's what the Rittenhouse case is here to decide. That is what its mission is, to disarm you, to prevent you from being able to protect yourself. Think about this. And you may say, well, Mike, that, but you only need to defend yourself in your home. That you might say that. And then you might look at what's going on in San Francisco. As reported on November 8th, that San Francisco residents are trying to debate whether or not they should just tolerate burglaries, that people breaking into their homes, endangering their lives, taking their property, disrupting their lives and harming them, well, you should disallow that. And if you are able to defend yourself, that you should not even defend yourself in your own home. And this is one of several cities where the government, the progressive ideology, is suggesting that you should pay people to not commit crimes, which is insanity all its own. But let's consider that. This is the mentality that the news media is presenting to you and telling you that's the right thing to do. That is what the progressives in elected office are telling you. No, you cannot defend yourself. You should not defend yourself. You should allow someone to take anything that you have, and that you should never defend yourself. And if you do defend yourself, in particular with a firearm, then you are a criminal, you have done something wrong, and you need to be punished. And in fact, they want it to be so extreme that you cannot do anything about it. Think about what's happening in New York right now. There is a case before the Supreme Court as we speak, as was being reported by CNN. Supreme Court seems poised to expand Second Amendment rights and strike down the New York handgun law. Except that headline is a lie. It is a lie. Because the Supreme Court is not expanding the Second Amendment rights of American citizens. They are maintaining them. You already have a right to defend yourself. And you already have the right to defend yourself outside of your home. Just like, as we showed you, the rape victim in Temple University. You have the right to defend yourself always. And that includes with deadly force, that includes with property that you own, whether that would be a baseball bat, whether that's a pair of keys, or whether it's a firearm. You have that right to defend yourself. But in New York State, we have seen that New York State has decided as of 2000, I believe it was 2008, 2008, that New York State decided that you need a special reason. The case is New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin. Concerns a New York law governing licenses to carry concealed handguns in public for self-defense. It requires a resident to obtain a license to carry a concealed pistol or revolver and demonstrate, quote, proper cause, end quote, exists for the permit. Residents must show that they have a great need for the license and that they face a special or unique danger to their life. This is insane. Why do you need that? And that's the question they ask. That's what the progressives would like you to say. Well, why do you need that? Because I want it. Because I have a right to it. I have an inherent right by birth that I am able to defend myself and to own an arm, whether from the government or from aggressors. There is no greater need than I wish to exercise my rights. That's like saying to someone, you can't talk about politics unless you have a special or unique need in your life to speak about politics, that you would restrict the First Amendment in that manner. No one would agree with that. No one would say you could do that. But yet that's what we're doing with the Second Amendment. That you only have that right under specific criteria that is determined by the very government it is meant to protect you from. And that should be something people take away. Now, I've said this all in context of what's going on with Kyle Rittenhouse. And I want you to understand the Kyle Rittenhouse case is more than just about this one young man defending himself from 3 pedophiles and criminals. It's more than that. This is about whether or not you in the future will be able to defend yourself or to even possess a firearm. This trial is going to be used as the template by which all self-defense cases, especially those with firearms, will be decided. Does the fact that you own a firearm and you have that firearm in public where it is legal to openly carry a firearm, many of the protesters, many of the rioters, many of the criminals in Kenosha were allowed to openly carry a firearm, and they did so. That doesn't mean that you are allowed to attack people randomly, but all of them, whether they were the rioters or Kyle Rittenhouse, they were allowed by law to openly carry a firearm. And they were allowed to defend themselves with those firearms. But now we're saying Kyle didn't have that right. The protesters did. The rioters did. Individuals that were seen actually damaging, burning down buildings, burning down cars, breaking property, which could endanger people's lives. We're being told by progressives that's okay. And anyone who tries to, who is afraid for their life in that situation, they don't get to defend themselves, because otherwise they will be labeled, as we saw Don Lemon do, as we saw CNN do, they will be labeled a vigilante. They will be claimed that they're some kind of Batman villain. No one has said that Kyle Rittenhouse has ever. Kyle Rittenhouse, the individuals who asked Kyle Rittenhouse to help defend their property, no one has said that Kyle Rittenhouse was trying to be a vigilante. No one except the state. The prosecutors have made that allegation. No one else has made it. Neither at that time nor since was anyone saying that Kyle was a vigilante. He wasn't there to try and stop the protests. He was there to protect the property. He was there to protect himself. And then we had individuals who aggressed against him, as we have seen on video, and he wound up defending himself. This is a big case, the Kyle Rittenhouse case. And I don't think most people realize how big it is in the environment that we find ourselves in. Under the Biden-Harris administration, which is very obviously and continuously leaning towards a progressive ideology, a democratic socialist ideology, where we see that they say Citizens don't have a right to defend themselves. They don't have a right to arm themselves. And we've seen things like when Joe Biden said on a CNN town hall, as he made it very, very clear, you don't have a right to own a 9mm handgun. That he wants to take away that right from you. That he would ban a handgun, a 9mm handgun, as well as all semi-automatic rifles, because they're capable of firing 20 rounds or more. And because they have that capability, not that they are doing that, not that they will do that, but because they have that capability, you lose that right. In fact, in New York State, as an example as well, the answer from the state is, and I want you to see this, according to CNN, and I quote, this is from Adam Skaggs, Chief Counsel of Giffords Law Center. This is an anti-Second Amendment group. This is a group who wants to disarm American citizens. They say, these states contain about a quarter of the United States population, in reference to New York and California, Illinois, and several others. So 1 in 4 Americans would likely experience significant increases in the number of people carrying guns in public places if the court were to strike down New York's law. What's their fear? People carrying firearms. How is that a danger to anyone? What about people carrying knives or baseball bats? In fact, any dangerous implement. If you look at New York State's red flag laws, they find it, you can have the government come in and take your property and damage your life forever without a crime ever being committed because you own a hammer. And I'm not joking here. This isn't some kind of hyperbole. I'm not trying to make something out of nothing. It literally states in New York State's red flag law, the exact wording of the law. Any kind of a weapon that any deadly force, any weapon that has ever been used to kill someone, that means hammers, baseball bats, nails, keys, knives, plates, bottles, anything, which would also include the ability to have a firearm. So people are carrying these things every day. There are people with knives every day. There are people with hammers every day. There are people with baseball bats every day walking around us all the time. There are so many dangerous weapons and dangerous implements that are available to the public every second of every day. A tree branch could kill someone, and yet the concern that comes out of the Giffords Law Center is that, well, people are going to carry guns. There are, in this nation at this moment, approximately 360 million firearms. There are, at this moment, in the United States, approximately 2 million people with an AR-15 firearm. There are, at this moment, in the United States, 165 million people, half of this nation, own a firearm of some sort. Roughly 60% of them are handguns. And we have not died. And this isn't a new number. This has been consistent throughout the history of the United States. The majority of the public have firearms and are armed. And the world didn't end. This didn't instantly mean that people died. People were able to defend themselves, and no one had question with that until recent history. So you have to ask yourself, what are they really trying to get to here? What is the real source of the problem? And every time we look back at the Rittenhouse case, we keep coming back to the question, it's about him having the firearm, not even necessarily that he used it or how he used it, but that he had it in the first place, that the possession of a firearm was the inciting factor. That was the problem. That is what the state is fighting against, owning a firearm. At the end of the day, they are saying what the Ninth Circuit Court said. You don't have a right to defend yourself the second you walk out of your home, and according to red flag laws, maybe not even in your own home. You should be defenseless. And the government, only the government, should have the right to determine who gets to own a firearm and how they defend you. You have no right to make any action without the government's approval first. That's what's at the core of the Rittenhouse case. That's what this is about. Your right to make choices for your life without having to get approval from the government first. I don't think many people are talking about this case in those terms. I don't think many people are thinking about the way the law is connected and looking at the ideology that is coming from both the Democrats in power and the news media and the agenda that they are trying to put forth as they continuously tell people, you don't have a right that you do have, that has been detailed, that was there since birth. It is inalienable. It cannot be separated from you and your life and your existence. And the government has no right to interfere with that. You may say to me, well, Mike, I don't agree. Kyle Rittenhouse was a bad man because he had a firearm and he used that firearm. You may want to take the position that he was a vigilante who did not go out and kill the hundreds, in fact, thousands of rioters and looters and criminals in Kenosha at that night in 2020. That argument doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Nobody was shot, and this was said in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. And I believe the prosecution said it several times. No one was shot except for those who attacked Kyle Rittenhouse. No one else. Only the people who were fighting and attacking Kyle Rittenhouse were shot or shot at. That is a fact. Gage Grosowitz, who survived losing his bicep, admitted that the only reason why he was shot it was because he was pointing a gun at the head of Kyle Rittenhouse. But yet the state and progressives and the news media want you to believe that if someone is pointing a gun at your head as you are sitting on the ground, having just been hit in the head, having just been attacked, that your proper response is to be unarmed and to allow that person with that firearm pointing at your head to kill you. That criminal has more rights than you do. Your life is secondary to the life of that criminal in his criminal action. And I want to be very clear. Gage Grosowitz, was a criminal. He had an illegal firearm, and he was using it in a manner to endanger someone's life without cause. He had no reason. He didn't know who Kyle Rittenhouse was. He didn't know what had happened with Kyle Rittenhouse. He was acting under a mob mentality, chasing down a man that he knew nothing about, and drew his weapon and pointed it at this individual, which anyone who has ever handled a firearm, who any trainer has ever stated about a firearm, as we were reminded by Alec Baldwin, you never point a firearm at anyone or anything you are not willing to shoot and kill. Perhaps you think I'm wrong. Maybe you think, well, Mike, you just don't get it. You misunderstand. And that's fair. Perhaps I do. But I want you to look at this and I want you to take a step away and understand and think about this in the full context. We have at this moment a Congress with members who are trying to strip your ability to afford and be able to maintain your Second Amendment rights. Representative Sheila Jackson Lee wants to make sure that if you are poor, if you are a minority, you are a woman, you do not have a right to a firearm. That's what her that's what her proposal, H.R. 127, would do. We have individuals in the White House like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris who have lied about what the laws are. They have lied to you on what the Second Amendment is. And they have directly stated that they want to take away your ability to own any firearm they don't like. And we have the Ninth Circuit Court, a very liberal, progressive judicial body that have said explicitly, you don't have a right to protect yourself outside your home, at the same time that we have laws in New York State that are saying, and across the country, that are saying, you don't have a right to defend yourself in your home. In fact, you don't have a right to a firearm if someone else doesn't like it, as per the red flag laws. And now we have this trial that will confirm those laws. We have the Kyle Rittenhouse case. If Kyle Rittenhouse is determined to be guilty in this case, it is political. The evidence, if you have watched the trial itself, not the interpretation of the trial, not the headlines about the trial on Twitter, but if you have watched the actual trial itself and the evidence that has been presented to the jury, what you're looking at is your self-defense on trial. Your right to defend yourself as a woman, as an human being, regardless of your color, your ethnicity, your gender, regardless of anything else, your right to defend yourself and your right to a firearm to help defend yourself from aggressors and the government is what is truly on trial here. Given that, I want to hear what you think about that. If you've made it through this discussion so far, I want you to look at all the links that we have in the description to think about this, and then we want you to answer and tell us in the comments. Do you think that the Kyle Rittenhouse case will help improve the right to self-defense and to own a firearm, the Second Amendment? Is this a positive for self-defense and the right to own a firearm, or will this strip away your rights to self-defense and to own a firearm? We really look forward to hearing what you have to say about that. And we thank you for taking the time to be with us here today to hear this conversation. We look forward to seeing you every Sunday at 2:30 p.m.